Despite what everyone tells you online, one of the biggest financial mistakes you can make with your money has nothing to do with which fund you picked or which platform you've used. And the people I know who are the most financially secure are rarely the people earning the most money. They're the people who did the right things in the right order. So let me introduce you to two people, Penny Wise and Leo Lavish. Their names are what they suggest. Penny's wise with their money. Leo likes the finer things in life. So every month, once they've covered their rent, bills, food, and everything they need to live, they're left with exactly the same amount to put towards their future. The difference is not how much money they have, it's what they choose to do with it. So Penny understands that building wealth is like building a house. You don't start with the roof and build the foundations after you build those foundations first. Whereas Leo skips straight to what looks exciting, assuming he can come back and sort the foundations later. But if we fast forward 10 years, Penny has options. So when life throws an unexpected expense, she can deal with it, carry on, and her investments stay invested because she's built those foundations. Whereas Leo has worked just as hard, but every time life gets in the way, he has to pause, dip into his savings, or start from square one. Penny simply understood that when you're building wealth, the order matters just as much as the decisions themselves. And in this video, I'm going to walk through that exact order. We'll start with why building your financial runway is a non-negotiable, then we'll cover the guaranteed return most people never think about, and finally how to invest as tax efficiently as possible so every pound you put in is working as hard as it can for you. But before we get into it, just a quick note, everything in this video is financial education and not financial advice. Your capital is always at risk when you invest. The cost of waiting is not always obvious in the moment. You'll put it off and tell yourself you'll start next month when you know a bit more or when you have a bit more money set aside. And life will just carry on as normal, but often years later, it will hit you in a way that's obvious and you cannot ignore it. It's when you want to buy a bigger home and you realize you're much further away than you thought. Or when you want to retire early because you don't like your boss or you're tired of working and you realize you're not quite in the position you expected to be in. Or it's in one of those moments where life is unpredictable and unfair and cruel and something happens to somebody close to you and you wish you're in a stronger financial position to help. Those are the moments where investing stops being abstract and becomes very real. And it's not about growing your money on a screen, it's about giving yourself more options. And every month you delay, you do not feel anything until one day that you do. And I hate to say it, it could be in one of those cruel, unpredictable life moments. It's a bit like when you go to the gym or you don't go to the gym and one day you look in the mirror and you are fat. Investing is exactly the same way. Every day you put it off, you don't feel the pain until one day you need that money to help somebody potentially and you can't, or you want to improve your life and you can't. That's when it matters, and that's when you realize you haven't done what you should have done. Before you invest a single penny, something needs to be in place first. Think about it like a child learning to run. Before they run, they learn to walk, and before they walk, they learn to stand, and before all of that, they learn to crawl. The emergency fund is exactly crawling. It's the foundation everything else sits on. Without it, you're trying to run before you can even stand. And here is what happens when people skip it. You start investing, which is the right instinct, but the market will have a downturn, and at the same time, real life happens. Your phone dies, your oven stops working the week before Christmas, an expense lands out of nowhere, you get the picture. And because of that, there is no cash set aside, which means you're forced to sell your investments at exactly the wrong time, just to deal with a short-term problem. And the emergency fund does two things. It protects your investments from being touched at the wrong moment, and it protects your mindset so when the markets get choppy, you know that you've got enough to cover yourself. And I'll give you a real life example. Right now I'm in Australia and I need to fly back to England for a wedding, but because of the conflict in the Middle East, we didn't want to fly through Dubai for our connecting flight. So we cancelled our original flights, took a 75% refund and rebooked to go via Hong Kong at more than double the original price. It wasn't in the budget, but because the emergency fund was there, that decision was much simpler. Yes, it still involves some stress, but it didn't feel like life or death. We could weigh up our options and make a decision from a position of choice, not panic. And that is the entire point. So how much do you actually need? If you have a stable income, I would aim for 3 months of essential outgoings before you start investing. So not your salary, enough to cover your essentials. So rent, your mortgage, bills, food, the non-negotiables. And once you have done that, I would then start investing and building towards a 6-month emergency fund alongside it. But that way you're not delaying investing forever. either. But if your income is unpredictable or you're self-employed or freelancing, I would go closer to 6 months of an emergency fund before you begin. That is my personal preference and my personal thinking. So before you put any money into the stock market, there is something worth thinking about. If you're employed, if your employer matches your pension contributions, that is effectively a guaranteed return before any investment is made. So for every pound you put in, your employer adds more on top up to a certain limit, but it means you're instantly ahead before markets, before risk, before anything else. But I want to be honest here because I think this gets oversimplified because there are two trade-offs worth understanding. The first is control. Most workplace pensions have limited fund choices, meaning you don't get the full flexibility of where your money goes. The second is access. So once your money goes in, it's locked away until your late 50s at the earliest. So the real question is not whether it's a good or bad, it's how much you want committed to your long-term locked away wealth and how much you want accessible sooner if your life changes. But two things you should never ignore is employer match, because that is free money, and pension tax relief. So in the UK, if you're a basic rate taxpayer, the government adds 20% on top of what you put in. If you're a higher rate taxpayer, even more. So do not leave guaranteed money on the table, but be intentional about what you're locking away in exchange for it, because you can't touch it until your late 50s. So once you have thought about pensions, the next question is, where should your money actually sit? Because not all investing accounts are the same. I invest across 3 different places, for example, a workplace pension, a self-invested personal pension known as a SIPP, and a stocks and shares ISA. But the one I want to focus on is the stocks and shares ISA because it gives you the most flexibility. And when I talk about a wrapper, I just mean the accounts your investments sit inside. So think of it a bit like this in terms of a chocolate bar. The chocolate is the investment itself. The wrapper just determines how it's taxed and when you can access it. And the stocks and shares ISA is the most flexible wrapper because everything inside grows free from capital gains tax, free from tax on dividends, and unlike a pension, you can access it whenever you want. And you can put up to £20,000 per year, per tax year, across your ISA accounts. So if you're just starting out, you don't need to overcomplicate it. And a lot of people begin with a broad, diversified fund that gives exposure to the market as a whole. That might not be the final answer for you, but a simple way to get started while you learn. Remember, it's not financial advice. And if you're watching from the US, the Roth IRA is the closest equivalent for tax-free growth, and the 401k is the employer match retirement savings. So capture the free money first, decide how much you want locked away versus being accessible, then choose the account structure that matches that balance, because the wrapper you choose often matters just as much as what you invest in. There's a moment that happens if you stay consistent long enough, and it's really hard to describe until you experience it yourself. And that's partly because you've grown alongside it. So it doesn't feel like your life has suddenly changed and it still feels normal. But you'll open your investment account one day and something will feel different. It's that the numbers just don't feel the same anymore, because at the start you were used to seeing those small changes where your account would change by a few pounds each day. It would go up and then it would go down, or sometimes it just wouldn't move at all. And then at some point in your journey, that same account is moving by thousands of pounds in a day instead. And it still feels strangely normal. It doesn't hit you straight away. It just takes a while for your brain to catch up with the scale of it. And it's a bit like when you look back at old photos of yourself. You don't notice that change because you're in the day to day, but you'll look back and you'll think, did I actually look like that? I can't believe I wore something like that. Or you'll go, was I really that fat? Or in my case, I was a lot skinnier back then. And everybody has that moment at some point. And it's the same idea. You just never really notice the changes while you're in it because you're too close. And like I say, you're in the day to day. And you only see it when you look back or you zoom out. And that's the part that most people underestimate when it comes to investing, because it only really works if you give it enough time for that moment to arrive. If you don't start, or you keep delaying it, or you never commit to it properly, you will never get to see that day, because you'll never get to the point where compounding has time to show itself. You just stay at the beginning of that process and questioning why it's not working. And that's why the order matters, because once you've built your runway and you've made sure you're not missing the guaranteed returns that are potentially available to you, and you've set up your investing in the right accounts, and the only thing left is allowing time to do its thing. So before I let you go, just a quick reminder, nothing in this video is financial advice. Everything I have shared here is financial education only, and your capital is always at risk when you invest. invest. But if this video gave you something to think about and you want to know more about these topics, I have an email newsletter that you can sign up to where I break down and talk about personal finance like this in a lot more detail. So if you enjoyed it and you want to sign up, all I need is your best email address, and the link to do that is in the description below. Or you can watch this video that YouTube recommends. It might be here, it might be here, it might be here. I never seem to get it right, but it's around here.